I want to tie together some themes that we've been talking about here in terms of the repeatability, the copycat part of this. Can anybody do it?
Hmm.
Their youth, how deep they are, all the things that we're talking about. And this is sort of a talking point, but I think it's worth bringing up right now. Is this the team that's best positioned to dominate the league like over the next? I've seen 10 years thrown out there. That seems like a lot. Every
That's
time
a
we think
lot.
a team is going to dominate for 10 years, they end up something happens in
Right.
year 3 or
I mean,
4
even the
that
Warriors didn't dominate
exactly.
for 10 years. Right. Yeah.
And I think we're in a stage now where I think we're in 5-year life cycles in the NBA, where I think even Boston felt like they were so positioned to be the dynasty after last year's run, and then even before the Jason Tatum injury, they were losing to the Knicks, all these things, and the wheels just sort of came off a little bit, and they started to wobble.
Yep.
But this Thunder team is so cost controlled. If you look at the cap sheet, they've got all these guys. They're just entering their prime. I don't even like Chet. I wouldn't even consider in his prime, not even close to it. I don't
Yep.
like Jalen Williams is 23.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It doesn't seem like they're really in their primes either. No. Yeah.
no. Is this our
So
next? Has this been our best bet at the next dynasty
yeah.
since Durant signed with Golden State in 2016?
So I look at it like I thought the Celtics and Nuggets both had really, really good paths to being sustainable
Me too.
championship contenders over the next couple of years. But as you said, it kind of fizzled out, right? And things happen that make things fizzle out in a way that you might not expect. So obviously the Tatum injury, but also to your point, I think there was some like inconsistency with the Celtics this season that they just did not have in their championship year. I think generally it's actually really hard to repeat in the NBA. So how are you going to be able to sustainably do that? The Nuggets obviously were kind of victim to cap crunch and not paying the money, or cheap ownership, whatever you want to call it, but generally like just not retaining their bench guys, and so their depth got depleted in a way that you couldn't replenish. That is not going to be the case for OKC because of the future draft pick capital,
Right.
because of the fact that they have guys who, like you said, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, honestly, even Cason Wallace, like these guys are going to get better. They have a lottery pick waiting in the wing in Nikola Topic, who I don't know if he'll end up being good, but apparently they're very high on him. We'll see. And they also have 2 picks in this draft
Right.
that they're going to work with. They also have multiple picks moving forward in the future that they can play around with. And I do think there is a situation where, like, actually, I was talking to this about with Andrew Schlecht of the NBA Daily, and he was kind of breaking down the cap stuff for them. OKC has paid the tax before. This is something that people don't know, or maybe just think that OKC doesn't pay the tax because of the whole James Harden thing, but they've paid the tax like 5 times
Right.
in the last 10 seasons or 12 seasons. They're going to be willing to pay the tax again, especially if they win a championship this year. So they go into the tax, they extend Jalen Williams, they extend Chet Holmgren. They obviously have that massive extension for SGA that's going to be coming in the wings. And you have some fluidity in the sense that Isaiah Hartenstein has a team option in a couple of seasons, in the sense that Lou Dort, I believe, has a player option or a team option on his final year in a couple of seasons. You have fluidity in what you can do trade-wise to like constantly replenish the back end of that roster and rotation, which I don't think any other team really has. So to answer, yes, I think they're well positioned. I think they're incredibly well positioned, but it's just a weird era where things can really quickly shift. And teams that I was very confident on in the Celtics and Nuggets fizzled out in ways that we imagined. So I don't know. It's hard for me to come out and say, yes, they're like the next dynasty. This is the next team, just because we haven't really seen anybody do it. But it's one of those things where it's like, someone has to do it in order for it to be the case. You know what I mean?
Right. But you look at the teams over the last, I don't know, decade that were dynasties that won multiple championships within, 2, 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
It was the big 3 Heat and those Warriors teams with Steph and Durant. And the thing that both of those teams had in common was 2 top 5 players.
Yeah.
Right. You had Dwayne Wade and LeBron, and then you had Steph and Durant. Where as much as we like Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren, they're not top 5 guys, right? And that's okay, big deal. They they got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's obviously one of the best 5 guys. So they're not really following that same crazy, extraordinary formula that those teams had. But at the same time, they're way deeper than those teams. They and unlike Denver and really Boston, like Boston. Jason Tatum goes down with the Achilles, and you lose a season, right?
Yeah.
And that's just what's going to happen. It doesn't mean it's the end of Boston's run, but it's definitely a gap year. Like, God forbid, like Chet Holmgren goes down with something like an ACL or something horrible.
Right.
They have all these draft picks that they could just use to just be like, here, take Chet off our hands. We're going to go get another guy who's not Chet Holmgren, but is 50% of Chet Holmgren. If we get 50% of Chet Holmgren and all of Isaiah Hartenstein's still here, we could probably still manufacture some pretty decent paint defense and get the things that we want to get. And so they're kind of like fortified against some of those things that brought down Denver and Boston because they have all this extra draft capital and these assets that they can move. I thought, like, if they were to lose in the playoffs, before the postseason began, I said, like, people were, what are the Thunder going to do if they lose? I'm like, they can kind of just do whatever they want. Like, what's an option for these other teams?
It's not an option. Like,
they have more options, right?
They have more options. Yeah.
I do the Locked On Heat show, and I would just tell people, I'm like, what if the Thunder lost in the second round because they couldn't make any threes, and then they just called the Heat and they said, we'll give you 4 first-rounders for Tyler Hero. No other team can really do that, but the Thunder can, right? There's like, he's an elite three-point shooter. Here's 4 first-round picks. Give them to us. And they'd almost have to say yes. They don't really want to trade Tyler Hero. That's a lot of picks.
Yeah, they can basically top any offer you have, and that's why they always get thrust into these like Giannis conversations, right. KD, whoever, right? They can just involve themselves, and they will instantly be the number one buyer. The other thing I think that's kind of similar to what you said about the Warriors is that the Warriors cap structure wise were in a unique situation because of Steph's ankles, right? Where it was like, all right, Steph's on a pretty cool contract, so we can go out and sign KD. We can go out
the cap spike,
and they had the cap spike. It's not similar to that, but in a similar way, when they traded for Gordon Hayward and he became an expiring salary, and they were like, all right, cool. Now we have the opportunity to trade for or sign Isaiah Hartenstein. And they also kind of maintained their flexibility by having Isaiah Hartenstein on a team option in 2026, 2027. I'm looking at their cap sheet right now. It kind of gives them that flexibility. Also, the fact that Shai is still on his current contract for another 2 seasons. So you have 2 more seasons after this one. Let's say they win the championship this year. You have 2 more seasons to win another one. And then after that, it's like, all right, cool. You become an expensive team. Yes, you have to be more prudent with what you do in the draft and how you kind of replenish the back end of your roster rotation wise and how you're going to extend Case and Wallace and all those guys. But for now, you have like a 2 or 3 year window to maximize as many championships as you possibly can. And beyond that, I think you're in a very, very good position to say we have Jalen Williams, who eventually, in 3 years will be 26, and Chet Holmgren will be 25, and Shai will be 30. But that's a very, very good launching point for the second half of this dynasty. So, yeah, I mean, now looking at the money wise, you're like they're in a pretty similar situation to what the Warriors were, where it's like they might be able to thread that needle of winning and then also being financially able to do so.
It's a great call, right? And I think that's the biggest lesson that Presti probably learned from 2012, because I think my critique of Presti back then was he was just so dedicated to building through youth. Like, he had Durant and Harden and Westbrook, and then they had traded Harden, and I think he just kept trying to say, like, let's just draft the next Harden or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And never really fleshed out the roster with vets that they clearly needed. And to me, my big takeaway when they signed Hartenstein and traded for Caruso was he learned his lesson from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Where he's like, no, we need these guys. It's okay. Like, we've got the youth guys. These guys popped. They panned out.
Yeah.
Let's go for this thing.
And you could also find other vets eventually, right? Like you in a couple of years, you'll be able to find your next Hartenstein. You'll be able to find maybe not a Caruso, that he's a very rare breed of player, but like you can find guys who can replicate some of their skill sets eventually, right? When those guys age out too.
Yep. I was just thinking about the best 24 and under players and how many the Thunder have.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't go through the whole, like, I could probably go 20 deep and they might have 3 or 4 of those guys.
Sure.
I went top 7. Okay. No particular order. Anthony Edwards, Wembanyama, Cunningham, Bencaro, Mobley.
Yeah.
And then Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren. They have to be on that list, somewhere on that list. Again, no order.
Yeah.
2 of the top 7 guys, 24 and under, plus Shai, who's 26, 27 years old. So